STRs, short-term rentals for short, have been much in the news lately, although they're not really a new story. In a sense, they harken back to an earlier time when renting out rooms, sometimes just for an overnight stay, sometimes for longer, was not uncommon during the heights of busy tourist seasons, such as fall foliage in Vermont. That faded away as motels became more prevalent in the mid 20th century, along with the more traditional hotels and bed and breakfast lodging establishments. But in the first decade of the 21st century, with the arrival of Airbnb, the idea of renting out rooms or entire homes to travelers passing through saw a revival. And since then, they have become a much bigger factor not only in the tourist economy, but as an important source of revenue for people who have some extra space to share. How many STRs there are in Vermont, or for that matter in individual towns, is often hard to determine. But last fall, the Vermont Housing Agency found the number of homes listed on platforms like Airbnb and VRBO, Vacation Rentals by Owner, totaled over 11,700, a 16% increase over the same period of time in 2022. As the industry has grown, it's also put pressure, some would argue, on the limited inventory of Vermont's housing stock. Although the data suggests STRs take up less than 4% of the state's total housing stock, in a tight market, even that could make a difference in available housing units, pricing some residential spaces off the market for people seeking an apartment or a starter home. Several towns around our area in northern Bennington County have begun developing ordinances for short-term rentals, and we stopped in at the town offices at four of them: Dorset, Manchester Village, Londonderry, and Sunderland, to find out where they were headed on this issue. We first met up with Rob Giotti, the town manager of Dorset.
Yeah, so the select board meeting last night, April 9th, they adopted a cleaned up draft of an ordinance that they had been working on really for probably the last 5 months or so, 4 or 5 months. It's fairly straightforward, pretty simple. It was modeled after the Chester ordinance with some some inclusion of other language from other ordinances that they sampled. It more or less sets the stage for a registry. It doesn't really add any rules that are beyond what the State Division of Fire Safety requires. It more or less, like, kind of makes reference to, hey, those rules are out there and you should make notice to your tenants or visitors that that you're complying with those rules. So one of the things is they have to pay an annual fee. The fee is $300 per unit. A unit is defined basically as a building, kind of a separate unit that can be rented separately. So there could be multiples on a property, and each building defined as a unit would have to pay a fee. We're not aware of too many that fall into that situation. One of the things that it does set the stage for is for us to have to do a little bit of research and outreach related to the online platforms, and get an idea of how many owners there are, who they are, how to get in touch with them, and to make them aware of when this becomes active, the registration form and the process. So we think it'll be a good, by registering, we'll get a good sense of what is out there in terms of data and how many, what size, parts of town, stuff like that, and it'll help us to kind of inform the process as we move forward.
Did you come up with any sort of definition of what a short-term rental is? Is that is there a certain period beyond which a house might be rented out?
Yep.
Some guests, it stops being a short-term rental.
Yeah, and I'm going to read from the actual document so I don't screw it up. But it's basically a furnished house, condo, other dwelling room, or self-contained dwelling unit rented to a transient, traveling, and vacationing public for a period of fewer than 30 consecutive days and for more than 14 days per calendar year. So it has to be more than 14 days total for the year, and then it's going to be rented in stints that are less than 30 days. That's kind of the definition they came up with.
Then it was over to Londonderry to hear from the town administrator, Shane O'Keefe.
Londonderry Select Board adopted an ordinance in December and it became effective in February, but also actually has amended the ordinance 2 meetings ago to reflect some information we received from the Fire Marshal's office, the State Fire Marshal, that they will not be inspecting short-term rentals with occupancy of less than 9 individuals. So that actually makes registration at the town level a little bit easier for some owners of short-term rentals.
So anyone who's running an STR, even if it's just like sort of a 1 bedroom, you would need to register and
Yes,
pay the fee. And
yeah, any size short-term rental would need to register on an annual basis. If you're renting out a part of your home for less than 14 days, then there is no need to register because technically you're not a short-term rental at that time.
so you have to be doing it for at least 14 days.
Right, or if the stay that you are renting for exceeds 30, then you're not a short-term rental.
So some of the concerns I've heard so far center around like noise and traffic, like if there's like a lot of parties or whatnot going on, or there's a lot of people coming back and forth, or if there's a kind of a rapid turnover of people who are staying at the STRs. Have those been issues that you've either been hearing about or the ordinance attempts to address?
At the very beginning, the whole issue of short-term rentals came to the attention of the select board when we did have some reports of neighbors of some bad actors at larger short-term rentals where they would have 10, 20 people staying at a home and not really respecting the rights of neighbors. And it would be, I'm presuming that, and almost sure that it's really the vast minority of short-term rentals are those party houses and the like. But those few bad actors cast a shadow on everybody else who are law-abiding or respectful of neighbors. So we're not in our process trying to be overly restrictive, but we are trying to ensure that that short-term rentals are safe for the residents there, but also respectful for neighbors. And it's not going to be, again, it's not designed to be overly restrictive, but we just want to gather information and ensure that people are being responsible and responsive.
Then we met up with Manchester Village's zoning administrative officer, Curran van der Weilen.
Yeah. So the ordinance itself is already in effect. We have a registration deadline of May 16th for this year, so our registration arm of that law is already active. And the ordinance overall, I mean, gosh, it's been a conversation now for, well, at least since I've been here. I arrived here in 2022, and at least then it was already a point of discussion with our planning commission. So it's been a few years at least coming. And the way that we structured the ordinance was centered around a couple of key concerns, essentially. One of those concerns was we had already commissioned a joint study with the town to better understand what the short-term rental market looked like. Was it impacting our housing market? How does it impact the hospitality sector? What exactly is the short-term rental market doing economically? And it left us with more questions, I think, than answers in a couple of areas. So one of the biggest, I guess, reasons the law exists is so that we can develop a better plan of action moving forward, whether or not, as we see whether or not, what those impacts look like. So that's what the registration is about. It's about understanding exactly what the market looks like. It's about understanding, exactly what we're looking at. And the other item that really came up in conversation a lot had to do with a series of complaints, both on the side of neighbors to short-term rentals and on operators themselves. Both of them had key concerns about how to resolve certain disputes across, I guess, property boundaries and stuff like this. And at the time, we weren't really well equipped to handle any of that. I mean, obviously, part of our role here is to help moderate between, angry neighbors and to help provide, guidance on issues like life safety and, disposal of trash and all this kind of stuff. And we didn't have any teeth to really help operators, determine what the best practices were to help their neighbors. neighbors, and we didn't have a lot of teeth to tell neighbors, hey, here's what we can do, to tell operators what they need to do. So the law kind of operates first on that registration piece, and second to give us some basic tools so that we can help operators say to their neighbors, no, we're operating correctly, and so we can tell those neighbors, no, the operator should do this or is already doing that, whatever it might be. And there's things like fire inspections, there's stuff like the actual management of trash and fire waste, this type of stuff. A couple of items that had come up in the past. So yeah, I guess the main catalysts were those two things. One, trying to better understand exactly what we're looking at, and then two, try to address some of those nascent concerns so that the municipality was a little better equipped. The third item that I think would come up aside from complaints and the actual initial registration is if someone didn't register or was registered and then didn't comply with the certain terms of that registration, whether that's they're not disposing of their trash properly or they're parking on their neighbor's lawn or something like this. I don't know what the issue might be, but if an issue came up in that respect, obviously we'd go through the complaint process, and or we'd have to talk to them about keeping their registration active. We might have to pull registration if an issue becomes acute enough. But again, the law, as I mentioned before, is more about understanding the market, more about getting a basic set of tools done, and I don't think we're trying to be really invasive with our enforcement methods. I think the idea is mostly just to handle basic issues as they come along.
And then finally, we stopped in at the Sunderland Town Hall to speak with the zoning administrator, Dave Kiernan.
Well, the first thing is that we noticed that quite a number of STRs were appearing in town, and that we were the only community, or we're rapidly becoming the only community in the area that doesn't have any short-term rental bylaws. And that puts us in a position of having a lot of investors, and I do get calls almost every other week from someone who's looking at property in town but wants to know what the STR rules are. So if we don't take some action, we're going to wind up with a lot of investor-owned properties and lose a lot of housing stock. Well, I think it'll be enforced through the zoning office. It'll be making sure that everyone's registered, and if complaints are filed, if part of our regulations are violated, say someone does throw up a wedding tent and has a huge party, then that will be addressed as a zoning violation. The biggest part about it is making sure they're registered and make sure that they fill out the compliance form that has safety, health, and tax requirements on it. We're looking at a nominal fee now of maybe $50. I know some other towns have quite a bit higher, but the Planning Commission always felt that this shouldn't be like a revenue source. It's more just we want to control the number of these and how they're being used, and really are concerned about the safety of the people staying in them. That's why a lot of our bylaw has to do with safety features and ways to notify people if there's something wrong in the house. Well, I think the first thing that struck me about them is, you move to an area and you expect to have your property rights to be enjoyed. Like all of a sudden, 90% of Sunderland is rural residential, and there's defined uses in a rural residential neighborhood. Then you have an investor buy a property and essentially use it as a hotel. And, that's introducing, there's no other way around, a commercial use in a residential neighborhood. But you have to be realistic about the changes that are taking place and people wanting this type of use, including the owners of some properties when they go away. So we just looked at this as a way of maintaining everybody's rights in the neighborhood, those of us who moved here for the rural residential environment, and we would like everyone to kind of respect that.
Sunderland Select Board and Planning Commission will be holding a public hearing on May 7th to hear from the public what a new proposed zoning ordinance should contain. The meeting will start at 6:30 p.m. at the Sunderland Town Hall. For the GNAT-TV News Project, I'm Andrew McKeever.